I was looking at these videos of Chinese auto factories the other day, and they're insane. Like, they're so-called dark factories that make EVs, and they're basically pitch black. There's no humans working there. It's all automated, only machines, only robots. And they make as much as one EV every 100 seconds. And having seen the Japanese equivalent or Japanese version of auto factories, I was like, how the hell is Japan going to compete with that? Are Japanese automakers doomed to fail? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. But first, why is it stupid to make both EVs and ICE cars in the same factory? Because that's what Japan is doing. Well, you see, Japanese car companies, especially Toyota, but most of them, they've had a so-called multi-pathway strategy. They've dipped their toes into EVs, but mostly they make ICE cars. And now they pivoted a bit to hybrids, so they make a lot of different components in each factories. In fact, looking at this image, this is an ICE car versus an EV. We have 2,000 components for the ICE engine to move, and we have 20 components for an EV to move. And because hybrids are so successful with Toyota, it's their most sold cars in all hybrids. They have more components. They have all the EV components plus all the ICE components, and they're all making this in the same factory. And the thing here is that they're actually very successful right now. Toyota is the biggest car company in the world, and it looks like it will be the biggest car company in the world for the foreseeable future. So they're doubling down on this strategy. But as we all know, EVs are gaining ground. And so what will happen when the tipping point comes? When more people start buying EVs than any other car, how will Japanese companies compete with their subpar EVs? Can Japanese automakers catch up? Toyota's master plan here is that they will just leapfrog the competition. They're investing tons in experimental technology, especially solid-state batteries. So far, there's no car that's mass-produced that has solid-state batteries. But Toyota says that by 2027, they'll have the first mass-produced cars with solid-state batteries only, which will have enormous benefits. The benefits, we already kind of know them. If you manage to create a solid-state battery car, you have way faster loading times or charging times. I'm talking about minutes instead of hours. We have way longer range, and we possibly have way more stable batteries that can last for way longer. Now, the only problem is that everybody knows the technology exists, and it's not like China is sleeping on it. They're in fact trying to create solid-state batteries every day, but so far it has not been nearly as good as the batteries that electric cars have today. So I don't know if this hope that we might one day get good solid-state battery that will be Toyota's batteries only because of their patents is a viable strategy for trying to leapfrog the EV technology as soon as people want to buy EVs instead of ICE cars. Also, Toyota and all Japanese automakers, to be fair, are really behind when it comes to software. And finally, software has become so important that people won't buy cars if it doesn't have good software. So now you have companies like Toyota spending billions on trying to mitigate this. And they've actually built a new platform that they call Arene. This platform is supposed to be a software platform that controls everything in the car, from suspension to the infotainment system to range, etc., etc. And it's cool. They rolled it out in a couple of cars and it seems to be working fine. But the problem here is that in 2013, BYD and Tesla had very similar systems working that Toyota is now introducing to the market. And to this day, a company like BYD has roughly 200 over-the-air updates. These are updates that significantly change the car for the better every year on each car. And Toyota has so far rolled out 8. 8. That's how far behind Toyota is. Sure, they might get better, but getting better is not good enough when competitors are getting better way faster. So that leads us to the point. Will Japanese automakers collapse? And if so, how will it look? Well, I've created a timeline that I think shows just how they will collapse if things don't get better faster. We have phase 1. That's losing emerging markets. Japan has an extreme foothold on emerging markets right now. In fact, almost 90% of cars sold in Southeast Asia over the years have been Japanese, but they're losing ground fast. Not only is China subsidizing their cars rapidly in these markets, they're also getting better and better. And soon, it might not make sense to buy Japanese ICE cars when a Chinese EV is both cheaper, cleaner, and better for the country. This is phase one. Phase two, financial strain. This will happen around year 4 to 7, depending on how fast the automakers fall. This is where Toyota, Honda, Nissan, whatever, really wake up to the problem that they haven't invested enough in EV. Global sales start contracting a bit. EV sales have finally reached that tipping point where they start increasing sales over ICE cars. And then these companies start pouring money into EVs that they should have done a long time ago. This will cause severe financial strain. And just like companies like Volkswagen, it's not enough to catch up when you also have to fund your own ICE platforms and your old manufacturing hubs. Companies like BYD has no legacy in this space and can move much faster and cheaper. And every time Toyota creates an EV that's good because they spent billions of dollars on it, it still has to be more expensive because their margin has to cover all the legacy that they have. BYD doesn't. Then we get to phase three. Phase three is the hollowing out of the supply chain. So as I said, Toyota, Honda, etc., they have these extremely complex ICE factories that basically have thousands and thousands of components that are made by thousands and thousands of suppliers. And because these sales are going down and Toyota, etc., can no longer support their suppliers, we'll see a slow hollowing out, which will make making ICE cars more and more expensive. So you have a lot of companies going bankrupt in the supply chain, which means that components from existing suppliers would get more and more expensive, which means that creating an ICE car will be more and more expensive. So not only do they have shrinking sales in this market, but the sales they have lower and lower margins because it costs more to produce each cars if you're making less of that car. And then in turn, the ICE sales are getting competed so hard with companies like BYD, which always pressures them on margins, that they can never get the same margins on EVs that they have on ICE cars. This will be a slow demise where the companies simply can't keep up with their cost and they will slowly lose momentum and eat themselves by trying to invest in technologies that are not profitable for them while having to supply technologies that are outdated and get more and more expensive every day to maintain. When things like this happen, you have to realize that Japan is incredibly reliant on their car companies, which means that any prime minister will say, we need to support them. They'll probably pump money into ICE cars to keep them alive or into Toyota factories to keep them alive, to not make them close them down. And sadly, I think this will make Toyota and etc. support these factories, even though they probably should be shut down, which will make their demise even harder because they cannot focus on what really matters. They can't take all their good engineers into EVs, etc. So if politicians get involved, I actually think we will see a faster hollowing out of the Japanese auto industry. Again, this could change. Japanese companies wake up to reality, or if they truly manage to leapfrog Chinese EVs or other country EVs with new amazing technology that is patented, Japan could very well have a chance of competing in the new auto space. But I don't think we should hold ourselves to that reality. I think the reality that's much more clear right now is that Japanese automakers will slowly collapse. So, if automakers in Japan collapses, is there a substitute? Well, yeah, actually there is. And that's the good news. You see, Japan is the world leader in industrial robots. And this is not talked about here enough. I talked about those dark factories in China. Well, it turns out Japan actually supplies most of the robotics for those factories. Companies like Fanuc and Yasukawa are all amazing at building industrial robots. And they will expand as these factories become commonplace. We also have companies that are making nano chips, a lot of semiconductor companies in Japan. A lot of these companies work directly with TSMC, NVIDIA, etc. And rumors are that Japan might be the first country that is able to make the 2 nanometer semiconductor chip, which is an insane breakthrough. But the problem here is that these companies all require insanely talented and insanely well educated engineers and scientists. And many, many people working in the car factory are the Japanese middle class. So you have a big problem here, right? Japan's workforce, 8% of them now work in the car industry. If this disappears, these people will likely not find another job, especially not another job that is as well paid as the jobs are in the car industry. That means they will likely see a hollowing out of the Japanese middle class, a hollowing out that's even worse than it is today. And that probably also means they will see a bigger division between rich people and poor people in Japan. There are cities dedicated to companies like Toyota. Like in Aichi, there's basically the Toyota city. And that city would basically cease to exist if Toyota doesn't supply the workers with money and jobs. It will basically be Detroit times 10. That's how big the Japanese car industry is. And that's how bad it would be for many, many Japanese cities. When I say the Japanese car industry might and probably will collapse if nothing drastic happens, I'm not saying it happily, gleaningly, like they deserve it. They deserve it because they never saw the writing on the wall, that they were too stubborn and conservative. I say it as a warning. And I think it's a warning to all of us that if we don't change and accept reality, our cushy jobs might no longer exist in the future. Thank you.